And, why not experiment a little bit with some of our great friends out there? Right, Eric?
Right. I think we're streaming. Welcome in, everybody. We have got a nice turnout in our audience on the bridge. Michael Myers, welcome, Michael. Long time no talk. Hey, Jonathan, thanks for the comment in chat there. We'll be getting going here in just 1 second. I believe we are now streaming. And Emily, I'm guessing you're streaming as well. So, howdy from Texas. Thanks, Michael. Glad you're here, my man. Why don't we hit record and we'll get this party started, all right? Derek, you want to kick us off in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Running into the Fog, Close the Distance and live stream format style. We are really excited you're here. Eric, how are you today?
I am doing just fine, Derek. And you?
I'm doing really good. It's hot AF here in Wisconsin, at least in terms of Wisconsin temperatures. We'll talk about that maybe in the non-family side of the show in the second half a little bit more. We are recording and live streaming episode 40 of Running into the Fog today, and that feels like a milestone we should celebrate for a second. And another thing we should celebrate for a second is the fact that we have one of our very own treasured family members, team members of Aurora WDC on the line with us today as our guest, Emily Pillar. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to see Emily.
You're hailing from Clearwater, Florida, outside of Tampa. Is that right?
That's right. Where the temperatures are always hot.
We like to keep things fresh here, y'all, on Running into the Fog. And it was a podcast that we did a few weeks ago with a gentleman by the name of Mark Lay. And if any of you were on that episode, you heard about some of the vulnerability and the transparency and other things that Mark brought. Forgiveness was a huge one in his world, right, Emily? And I think that podcast inspired you to say, well, I think I've got elements of my story that maybe are worth hearing and might be inspiring to people around you, both physically people around you as well as, theoretically an international audience if people tune into this now or into the future. And I think what makes your story so attractive to Eric and myself is that a big part of your story as a caregiver, we were there once. For those of you that don't know, Eric and I call it, we became orphans. I don't think you quite look at it that way, big brother, but I wasn't married and hitched at the time that our parents passed away as you were. So I see it as a bit of an orphan situation, but through all challenging times, you try to find the good in the not so good. And you grow and you learn and you keep grinding, and all that can be really educational. The School of Hard Knocks, I know, will be a theme that comes up today, at least more than once. And when our parents passed away, our dad passed away in '99, our mom in '01, and the reality is Eric and I had to be a little bit of a caregiver at times back in our mid-20s, right? And I think that that's a part of your story, Emily, that you're both proud of. It's been challenging, no doubt, but ultimately you walk away as a stronger person. And I think that element to your story is something I really look forward to jamming on, particularly in this front half, the unthinkable element of Running into the Fog today. So, with that, why don't we get started? Tell us a little bit about your past and, how you became a caregiver at such a young age.
Yeah. So what you said about my connection to a past guest on the podcast was correct. I think I'd say that what I connected with the most was this concept of finding answers to questions in unlikely places. So yeah, that inspired me to reach out and say, I think I have something I want to share. But to dive into that, some of you may have seen the question that I shared on social media. What does caregiving, competitive intelligence, and this 30,000 foot view, the view from an airplane window, have in common? Simple answer to that is in the last 5 months of 2017, I had taken a total of 14 flights. Most of those flights were related to a traumatic event for me, and 2 of them brought me to the big city of Madison, Wisconsin. They were both journeys have been foggy and were particularly foggy at the time in their own right, but we will dive into that a bit here. So to start at the beginning, there was an early morning in July of 2017. I was getting ready to go to work, was getting ready to head to my cubicle. I was typically the first person in the office, so it was still dark outside. I got a phone call, said my dad had been in an accident in his log truck. He was like, he's a up with the sunrise kind of guy. It was lucky that his trailer wasn't loaded because it could have been worse if it was. But I got all these, a few details about it that were, oh, he hit his head and he had been taken by ambulance to a hospital. So I'm left there like, okay, what does that mean? I have to decide what to do, how to react to that. It's shocking, obviously. First thing I do is text my manager and I say, hey, this is what happened. I'm definitely going to be late, but I don't know, exactly what the next steps for me are. So I'm sitting there and the first thing I do is pray. That's something that I do to help me make decisions. And then I'm trying to figure out what are the questions that I need to answer to decide how serious this is and how I respond to it. And the information I had so far was really hard to go on, right? It was like, okay, he hit his head, but what does that mean? And I'm not a neurologist. I'm not, a doctor. I might have like basic medical, know-how, information, but I don't know what to do with that. Luckily, a family member, it didn't take long before one family member in particular reached out to me and just was super direct and said, this is serious. You need to get here now. And I was like, thank you, because I finally had the information that I needed to make the decision. And I was, I think 25 at the time, going on 26, a few months away from that. And so as you can imagine, I hadn't been through this type of situation before. If any of you have been through it, especially the first time it happens, it's really hard to know what's serious enough to just drop everything and go. It's also, and if a loved one is passing away, it's sometimes hard to predict that. You just don't know when to drop everything and go. It's a hard decision to make. And so I was really thankful for that information from a family member that actually helped me make the decision versus all these, disparate details about the accident and so on. So in a essentially a moment's notice, I'm booking a flight from Tampa to Atlanta. I'm hopping on, I'm talking to my sister about how she can get there, what time I'm going to get there, how I'm going to get from the airport to the hospital, which was like an hour and a half away. So I'm like booking a van ride, a shuttle from the airport from Atlanta to Macon, and then, arranging someone to pick me up in Macon once I got there. I arrive and, I see my dad and he's hooked up to all these tubes. It's super swollen. They're doing all these tests and things. We don't really have any answers yet. So I'm just trying to get a lay of the land, trying to understand what we're dealing with, how do I need to act, and all of those things. Anyways, we eventually get some answers. of course, and we find out my dad had a massive stroke. He had a traumatic brain injury. He's got punctured lungs, broken ribs, all these different, a laundry list of injuries, of course. And I think it's important to note that my dad doesn't have a spouse. And so my sister and I are his next of kin. He was in a coma and, requires other people to sort of step in and be an advocate for them. And in this situation, it's my sister and I who are the ones who need to step up to the plate. If you don't have a family member there, doctors will make the decisions alone. But I know my dad, I know his medical history. I know, certain things about him that make me well equipped to advocate for him, and maybe even better equipped to advocate for certain things than people who don't know him at all. So this big responsibility kind of automatically falls on the shoulders of my sister and I. And it starts this journey of a never-ending just chasm of new decisions that we have to make that we don't know anything about. So it's researching just nonstop, everything we have to do, and there's multiple decisions on a daily basis. It's very important to be in the hospital on a daily basis really early in the morning, because that's when physicians make their rounds, and that's when you can ask questions, that's when you can get the notes down. What's really tough about the healthcare system, if any of you have experienced this, and I don't know about Canada or in other places, but in the US, there can be a really big disconnect between healthcare providers, because you might have the same physician that's rounding for like 4 days in a row, and then there's a new one. They're also putting in orders all day long to different specialists that have to come by and take different tests or do different procedures. And it's sometimes people walk into a room without even reading a medical chart. We had a big neurologist come in and say, at this point, we don't think your dad has had a stroke. And it was like 4 days in, and we had already been told he had a massive stroke. And we literally had a neurologist say that. He didn't read the chart. He simply didn't read the chart before walking in the room. That was a huge eye-opener for me. The whole situation was to the need for advocacy through a healthcare journey in general, but especially a healthcare journey of this level. So my dad's in a coma. He needs all these surgeries. It's serious stuff. We don't know if his brain's going to stop swelling, all these things. All I can do is take notes, gather data, kind of verify what doctors are saying, make sure that people have read the chart. If they haven't read the chart, I am able to speak up if I hear something that's like not exactly up to date or incorrect or whatever. But it's crazy how often that happens. Long story short, my dad's on this journey. He's going to make it. We have a lot of procedures to get done and a long way to go, but we're just taking it day by day, researching everything as it comes. And we've started to identify like how we need to be there, what we need to do to advocate effectively. We're forming our understanding of how to drive decisions forward in this atmosphere. So how that relates to my travel to Madison, Wisconsin. Let's see. So from July to September, fast forward to September, I started an interview process with a little company called Aurora WDC. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. I saw a few attendees that this might be your first time interacting with Aurora, but that's where we all come from. Eric started the company. Derek is the CEO now. Great leaders, but anyways, I'm interviewing with Aurora WDC for this position in competitive intelligence, a position as an intelligence analyst, which is something that I haven't done outright in the past. So I had a lot of experience that related to the role, but I hadn't done that exactly in the past. So of course, before I took the leap to apply an interview, I had a million questions and decided to proceed. And I'm very thankful that someone saw the potential in me to explore this career opportunity. Shout out to Lindy Smart if she's on the line. Forever grateful for that and for the opportunity that you guys, opened up to me. But I start this interview process. At this time, I'm flying back and forth every other week, it feels like, from Tampa to Atlanta, because my sister and I are taking turns covering my dad's healthcare journey. And there's big surgeries and things. There were a lot of challenging times in that. One thing I'd say is, like, I had a manager that literally said to me, "You don't need to be there. Doctors have to treat him. You don't need to be there to sign papers." And, being pretty young at the time, I knew that wasn't right, but I'd never had a manager say something like that to me before. So I was pretty timid in my response back, but I spoke up and said, "I need to be here, that, he's about to undergo a surgery that, he could pass away. This is a risky thing. There's nowhere else I would be. There's nowhere else that is worth it for me to be." Anyways, so there were so many different situations like that where I had to stand up and use my voice and really decide what my values were, what my convictions were, and act on those. But that just describes kind of like the period of time in my life where I started to embark on this potential new journey into competitive intelligence. And I'm, lots of interviews, work product I'm sharing and things like that. And I, in the end, I'm here, right? Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, 5 years later, right? When's your 5th anniversary, by the way?
Yeah.
Must be right around now.
It's coming up in October.
Okay. I was going to say, congratulations. If you can survive 5 years at Aurora, you're a pro at that point. And frankly, if you've survived the interview process, you're a pro. But, it's so fun to hear what else was going on in your life at that time. And, as someone who follows your journey on Facebook pretty closely, you and Billy have been, and your whole family has been in my prayers very often, as I've seen the hurdles and how you have collectively leapt those hurdles, and also the occasional setback, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And just what an inspiration that's been to see the love there between you and your family, and how, that has really become the Emily that I know. Obviously I know you through your work to a certain extent here at Aurora and the work you do for our clients, but what really impresses me is what you've done in service to those that have been put in your path. And so, I wish I was flabbergasted at your manager telling you that, but candidly, I'm not surprised. And from Aurora's standpoint, I'll say it's an advantage to us. I think that you would probably expect, as I would, if this happened to somebody, that was, in your work group here at Aurora, my guess is the answer would be take as much time as you need. And from time to time, we've had to do that, and we'll be fine without you. Come back when you're able. And even if you're not ready, that's the thing about, finding your calling, I think. And maybe that's what my question is intelligence your calling? And Emily, what's it been like to sort of explore that if you haven't yet discovered it? And no personal I won't take it personally if it's not.
I love the freedom that you offered in that question, Eric. So thank you. Thank you for all the kind words. And the way that you and Derek and the rest of the Aurora family has supported my journey, because it's really meaningful. To answer that, it's funny, having not known much about competitive intelligence before I jumped in, it was pretty wild to me how quickly I, caught on and became so passionate about it. And it's interesting because as I got further and further in, I saw how my natural skills and abilities, the ways in which I think, the ways in which I operate, how those lended themselves to this, exact place and time where I needed them. I can think back to I've been a strategic thinker all of my life. And like a project manager all of my life. I can think back to when I was a kid, really, really young age, like 5 years old. It's kind of a weird thing about me, but here it goes. I used to think in my head about what would happen if I just I'm walking on a sidewalk and I just walk off the sidewalk real quick. Will that change my future? I used to think about things like that all the time as a kid, potential alternative futures. And how would my actions impact the future at 5 years old? I can think of, being 12 years old, and I come from a household that lived paycheck to paycheck. Single mom, my dad was involved, but, that was my reality. And a lot of times we would kind of run out of groceries toward, it's getting closer to payday. We'd really run out of groceries. And I started to think about, well, I wonder how we could get more for less. And I started walking to the newspaper stand, and I would buy a newspaper and I would clip coupons and I would make a list. And I would say, Mom, this is a list I made. I think this is what we should get. And that will, help us last, everything would last. Sorry, that makes me a little emotional to think about.
Awesome.
But,
Beautiful.
the problem solving, the strategic thinking,
Yeah.
it was always there. And my passion for supporting business and moving business forward and making good decisions in business had always been there as well. Before coming to Aurora, I sort of aspired to a path in marketing because of those passions that I had. But it's really crazy how the stars aligned. And I do feel that competitive intelligence is a calling for me.
Right.
Particularly right now, who knows what the future holds, but I feel like I'm in the right place.
Wow, that is so cool to hear.
So the 5-year anniversary at Aurora's, set that aside for a second. You've got a 5-year anniversary of your dad's tragic accident coming up even sooner.
Next month.
And, I know there's people on this line. I know some of them by name, and some of them I don't know their story, but I can assure you they're out there who are going through something like this right now. And you gave them some tips, Emily, on, be at the hospital in the morning hours because that's when the docs make their rounds. Challenge a renowned neurosurgeon when it's clear that he or she didn't read the chart. You've given some tips like that, but what other tips do you have? Some of those unthinkable tips like, wow, I never knew this might happen in a hospital system as a caregiver. What do you have for this audience we have today, and when this gets recorded and put out there, that you wish you knew 5 years ago?
Yeah.
That you've learned through just the act of doing it. And you said something that I will take away for a long time after this podcast. What questions do I need to assess to know how to react?
Yeah, so you captured a few of them that are the biggest things that I'd share, very key things. So number one is be there and pay attention. Keep notes, keep your own notes. Ask questions, do not be afraid to ask questions. if you don't understand something that a provider is explaining, ask the question. I remember a situation where there was a resident doing rounds and she was so busy. I could tell she was so stressed and just doing the best that she could. And, I've learned a lot about the experience of being a resident, and that is a very stressful and stretching time in your life. But she was working so hard and cared a lot. She was talking about something and I said, hey, you're commenting on these images and I didn't know that these images were taken. What was the purpose for this imaging? That hasn't been explained to me. I just want to understand as best I can. And you could tell she was in a hurry, but she needed to answer the question though. That's her responsibility. So I was glad that I spoke up in that situation and in others. It's not always the easiest thing to do. People are busy, they got to move to their next patient, all these things. But decide what's important and stand up for it. So take the notes, ask the questions. Another thing I would say that's really, really important is learn how to set boundaries for yourself, for your own sanity, for your own health and wellness. You have to prioritize your own health, which can be very hard because you're going through a super emotional experience, first of all. Second of all, sometimes those, the places where you have to step in it's very urgent. You just have to. And a lot of times you have to make yourself second. But as my dad started to recover, his symptoms from his brain injury and things were something I had to learn about and deal with, and I had to set boundaries around, but it was hard to. He used to call me nonstop all day long. And that was a product of something called perseveration, which is where a person can get just stuck on one concept, and a lot of times that deals with speech, like you're repeating something, you're actually physically saying it. There's another term for your mind getting stuck on it as well, but he would do both of that. He would just call me all day long, and it was for, Emily, I need new socks, or something like that. And I had to, at first I would just jump, because there was a sense of feeling guilty that he had lost his independence, feeling guilty that he was a strong, hardworking man who was almost at retirement, and he just lost his ability to do anything for himself. And I hated that. I thought about myself, if I want something, I can just go get it on Amazon right now. I can go down to the store, whatever. But he had lost his autonomy, and I took that upon myself. But at a certain point I had to say, hey, Dad, I've got that on the list. I'm going to be putting an order in on Friday. If you think of anything else, let me know. I'm going to order it on Friday. It'll be, you'll get it in just a few days after that. But I have to work right now, or I have to eat dinner, or I have, you feel really bad for doing things for yourself as well. I couldn't do anything for myself for so long because there was always just this long list that never ended of things that I needed to take care of for my dad. And some of them were really important things. And so that's hard. And you have to find ways to get yourself back too. So you have to build that in little places here and there. And for me, it was art, just doing one thing that I enjoyed again, that made me feel like myself. It's like, I'm going to take 20 minutes on Saturday to paint, instead of spending the whole day, or maybe an hour. And, maybe you set it up for 20 minutes and you let yourself go for an hour, but it's just taking that step that matters, instead of researching all day or making calls or whatever. I know we're getting to the middle point here, so I'll stop there.
I thought what Sarah Soriano put into the chat here, Sarah, thank you for this. You talk about your own, a little over decade long caregiving journey. If you're not taking the time to recover as a caregiver, you can't be at your best. Yeah. And not only will you not be at your best for the person you're caring for, you'll end up getting sick, or you'll get so deteriorated that it's going to have an impact on you. And it couldn't be a greater concept that you put out there, Sarah. Thank you for that. Eric, you have something to scan here?
Well, I do. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't scan it because you all have scanned all 20 of the POAPs that are available for Unthinkable. So that's a big success, by the way. And thank you all who scanned and redeemed and minted your POAPs there. We haven't done that yet. And I'm pretty stoked about that. I didn't get my POAP for Unthinkable, by the way, which is kind of a shock. I was going to demo this as we go. We'll do it during Unspeakable when we say goodbye to the social streamers. But for those of you who have not yet registered, go out to Open Recon and get registered for the bridge and come back and join us on the bridge as a named, known, attendee. And if you miss out on that, I guess that sucks to be you. But Emily, would you like to say goodbye to our colleagues on the Russian botnets? До свидания, Rossiyskaya Seta Robotov. See you next time on Running Into the Fog next Tuesday. But Emily, any message for our social streamers before we cut them loose?
Yeah, I'm just so grateful for everybody who tuned in. Great job on the participation and scanning the POAP. And I hope you've registered by now so you can join us in the second half of the segment too, because there's more good stuff coming soon.
And we have a comment, by the way, from Sarah Gore. Very proud of you, Emily. Love you so very much, by the way, which is a good way to end social. So
it is.
Bye-bye.
That's my
Social.
big sister.
That's your big sister there, Emily Gore. Awesome. Well, Emily, you are hereby invited to take the third interlocutor slot. We've got two taken by the way. Terry Thiel and Jonathan Dennett are going to be our first two interlocutors here in